Welcome to the channel, guys. We are back again for another edition of WTF Did I Just Blind Buy? And today we're going to be talking about Verte by Kilian, so stay tuned for that. If you like fragrance reviews, cologne comparisons, first impressions, and top 10 lists, hit that subscribe button for more great content. So, I'm actually a huge Kilian fan. I think the first thing that really attracted me to the brand was the aesthetic. You know, I wasn't super interested in it just to begin with, but the bottles I always found very, very pleasing, eventually drew me into the brand. And you know what, I really do love a lot of their fragrances. Now, Verte is one of the new liqueurs along with apple brandy on the rocks. You know, this one is the one that I think less people are hyped up about or less people are talking about, although I have definitely seen some talk of this fragrance. Personally, I wanted to go with this one because, first of all, it sounded interesting, it sounded different, and, you know, I don't dislike apple brandy, but I always liked single malt more. You know, I wasn't a huge apple brandy fan, although I do like it, so I wasn't as hyped for it. This one sounded, like I said, interesting, different, and unique. So, I did go down to the store. I was hoping to get a sample or something like that, and they didn't even have any testers, although he did have a refill bottle. I briefly sniffed it, so I guess this isn't like a full blind purchase because I did briefly sniff it. After about 30 seconds, I decided I was going to buy this fragrance, so it's almost completely blind. But I did get a lot of the things out of it that I thought I was going to in the opening. So anyways, without further ado, let's get right into the fragrance. So this one is an absinthe fragrance. I believe A Taste of Heaven is the other absinthe fragrance from Kilian. And this one is really supposed to mimic that experience of like France, which they called Verte, where all the artists would, you know, go and drink absinthe as their muse, if you want to think about it that way. One of the things to remember about absinthe is that it is, it's made with sugar. So they pour water over some sugar to mix it in with the absinthe because it's actually very, very strong. Now, I have had absinthe. I don't believe it's quite the same stuff they were drinking back in the day because I think the stuff that's illegal in Canada doesn't have wormwood in it or something like that, but it is extremely strong. It's like 75%, so it is going to at least get you intoxicated. Now, right in the opening, right in the rip of this one initially, and the one reason I really decided to buy this is I definitely get a really nice boozy licorice vibe. Now, a lot of people I'd seen talking about this one, they said on their skin they don't really get that and they didn't like that about it because it was something they were definitely looking forward to. And at least for me and with my pH and the way my skin reacts with this fragrance, when this one opens up, I get a super boozy licorice vibe that actually reminds me a lot of ouzo, if you've ever had this. It is a drink made from anise. I believe it's anise, and it is a Greek alcoholic drink. Quite strong as well, and it reminds me a lot of that. Now, there is something a little bit going on in the background initially, but the one thing I actually found really interesting with this fragrance is that quite quickly what happens is you get a little bit of a almost grainy sugar vibe. Now, sugar isn't a note, and I don't know what it is that's doing that. Some people suggest that it's maybe the violet, but there is something about this fragrance that as it moves on within the first few minutes, the boozy licorice starts to get enveloped by this sweet, sugary vibe. Now, it does actually smell a lot like a sugar cube or like pure sugar. So it's not something that's just sweet. It is actually very much gives you the impression of the sugary vibe. And this is something I really gotta, you know, give to perfumer on this one, give to the brand Kilian, because they really were trying to recreate that experience of, you know, pouring the water over top of the sugar, and you definitely really get that feeling. And I actually find that, you know, as this one is moving a little bit more towards the mid, the sugariness gets quite intense and then starts to draw back a little bit. And as it draws back, I start to get a little bit more of the licorice. So while the licorice is very intense in the opening, you know, it does start to take a little bit of backseat and it starts to come out a little bit more in the mid as that sugariness does start to tone down a little bit. So from there, I do find it it moves into this nice, somewhat woody, slightly boozy. It almost feels a little bit of a green vibe, but it does have a really nice, unique, inviting dry down as well. Not as boozy. I don't get as much of the sweetness, although there's a hint of it there. And I don't really get tons of the licorice in the dry down, but there is maybe a little small hint of it there. So if you really just want something that has an intense licorice vibe the whole way through, this isn't really going to be it. But for me, and again on my skin, and I would recommend heavily trying it on skin, you always really should, that licorice is quite prominent in the opening. Anyways, now the performance on this one has been a little bit difficult to pin down. So the first couple of times I wore this, I was a little bit disappointed with the performance. So it was one that certainly didn't last very long, maybe in that 4 to 6 hour range. And it was something that, aside from what seemed like a very loud opening, it does seem to sit a little closer to the skin. And I do still get that impression after wearing it more frequently, and definitely after sampling and trying it a little bit more. But at the same time, I do think the projection lasts a little bit longer than I had originally assumed. I do get a little bit more of that 1.5 to 2 hours of projection. And really, right when you spray this, it does definitely give off the impression of being absolute beast mode. But I do think this lasts a little bit more in the 6 to 8 hour range. You know, it's not extremely long lasting, and really the biggest complaint I would have about this one is the performance isn't fantastic. If this performed like Black Phantom, for example, that would be amazing. I would really, really love it. Now, the only thing I'm going to say about that is I had a similar issue with Straight to Heaven. And Straight to Heaven I found, you know, I love the fragrance, but it didn't perform on my skin like 4 hours maximum. But it was one that after it matured a little bit, it started to last a lot longer, in that 8 to 10 hour mark, in fact. So really, really nice. And I am hoping that this, as it matures, will get to have that kind of performance as well. But I can't, you know, say that right now that it's going to, but hopefully as the weeks go by, this is definitely going to start getting a little bit stronger in the performance. That does sometimes happen with fragrances as they mature. So definitely hoping that does happen, but like I said, can't promise that by any means whatsoever. Speaking of the performance though, I think one of the things is this is one that I go a little bit anosmic to. So I don't get tons of whiffs of it. Although, you know, if I would have it on my hand and I bring my hand fairly close to my nose, I would smell or pick up that something is there for quite a while. But definitely not the same robust fragrance that you get in the opening. Now, again, I think the performance is okay, could be better. That's the biggest drawback. Of course, this does have the beautiful presentation. The fragrance is itself also a little bit green. Looks a little bit like a whiskey glass or something like that, which really works with the whole liqueurs collection. To me, this was, you know, an absolutely stunning presentation. And for both this and Apple Brandy on the Rocks, there will be refills coming. They just tend to come a little bit later. That's probably, I think, a little bit of a money thing that they do that, so they get maybe people buying more full bottles because you can't get the refills right away. That's just my assumption, but there might be something else behind it. Anyways, this is a really nice one for fall, potentially winter as well. It's, like I said, very strong in the opening, so it definitely, you know, if you spray it and then go out in the colder weather, it'll definitely work. If you're in a more controlled environment for for heat, obviously you can almost wear whatever you want, really. But I think this one could be okay for winter, but definitely a fall fragrance. Really, really good for that, in my opinion. So it was a good timing on the release for this one by Kilian. The other thing to talk about with this fragrance is, you know, I actually feel like this is, you know, it is a different fragrance, but I do think it's a fairly easy wear. It's not something that's overly challenging. Obviously, people that hate licorice are not going to like this fragrance at all, because it, you know, in the opening does have a very strong licorice vibe to it. But especially as this one dries down, I think it's very easy to pull off, very masculine. There is a little bit of sweetness there that adds actually a little bit of intrigue, especially when you get a little bit of that sweetness starting to come in with the licorice. It adds a nice intrigue to the fragrance, and I really, really like that. So I think despite this being different, it is very easy to pull off, and it is an easy wear. This one could definitely be a night out, classy kind of fragrance for sure. And I think a lot of Kilians really are, evening fragrances, although you can wear them anytime, a lot of them. They are really well suited for going out in the evening. They're really nice for either formal occasions or dates. Again, this one would be fine, I think, on a date, unless your date hates licorice. But once this one starts to dry down, the licorice tones down a lot. I think most people will find it at least not offensive, but I think it is generally a little bit more mass appealing than people might expect from this type of fragrance. So that's my idea. I think, more formal occasions and evenings out are the best times to wear this fragrance. Myself, I'll be wearing it a little bit more broadly than just that. But I think that's kind of where it really shines, especially in the fall. Anyways, guys, that is it for this fragrance review. I am happy with this one overall. Really good release. Like I said, the only real complaint, I wish the performance was a little bit better, because it would definitely feel like you're getting the value for your money there. But the scent profile is very interesting, very unique, very different. So I do like that about it. Anyways, like I said, that's it for this one, guys. Leave a comment down below. Which one were you really looking forward for by Kilian, either Apple Brandy on the Rocks or Lure Verte? Or is there some other fragrance that you're really looking forward to being released, in the near future? Let me know in the comments down below. And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next video.